Well, let's go ahead and get started. I want to respect everyone's time. So everyone, thank you for joining us. I think I know most of the people, but this is also going to be recorded. And so for people that don't know me or for people that are maybe watching this later when it's posted to UTRF's website, my name's Richard Magid. I'm the Director of Technology Transfer and a Vice President with UT Research Foundation here at the UT Health Science Center. And this is a part of our regular Tech Talk series where we try to promote commercialization and provide some useful advice for people that are thinking about technology transfer, thinking about intellectual property, commercialization, entrepreneurship, really anything that's involved in taking an idea from the lab to the marketplace. Today we have a fantastic panel that's made themselves available for a discussion specifically around entrepreneurship and around being a faculty entrepreneur here at the UT Health Science Center. So without any further ado, let me have them introduce themselves. One last administrative note. Obviously, we're all pretty good at Zoom these days, but please watch your mute setting if there's noise on your end. I can also mute you. Please don't take it personally if you find yourself muted because of noise. And then if you have questions, we definitely want this to be an interactive session. So please, if you put a question into the chat box, I'll make sure that it gets addressed, time permitting, to the panelists. So with that, we have two faculty entrepreneurs, Dr. Monica Jablonski and Dr. Wei Li, and then our moderator today will be the entrepreneur in residence for the campus, Chris West. Chris, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Richard, and I appreciate I'm really excited about this today. So I hope that we have a lot of interactivity with. We have prepared questions, but we would certainly welcome yours. Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to Monica to introduce herself, and then Wei, and then I'll do a quick introduction. Then we'll start with the questions.
Okay, hi, I'm Monica Jablonski. I'm a professor in the ophthalmology department here on the UT campus in the Hamilton Eye Institute. I've been on faculty here for almost 25 years. And I think it was in 2013, I founded Oculotherapy. And I started it before we even had a product or a technology that we could advance, but it's something that I always wanted to do. And we're making some pretty good progress, and I'm happy to share that with you throughout this presentation.
All right, Wei.
Yes, so my name is Wei Li. I'm a faculty here in Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences in Cardiac Pharmacy. So I'm here almost as long as Monica is here, so a little bit less. So I'm here in 22 years, going to 23. I'm a medicinal chemist, receiving my chemistry PhD from Columbia, and right after that, I come here down to Memphis. My company is Seek Therapeutics, and I set it up on November 16th of 2018. So it's a little bit over 2 years and going to about 3 years. I learned a lot from Monica and other faculty here. So I think this is a very good platform to share my journey and my experience. Hopefully it's going to be helpful to other faculty who are interested in doing that.
All right, thank you. And again, I'm Chris West. One of my roles is entrepreneur in residence for, wow, that picture was evidently taken right out of high school. So, but I'm entrepreneur in residence for UTRF. Came to Memphis. I'm a former executive in the pharmaceutical biotech industry. I started my career with really Fortune 50 companies, Warner Lambert, and then GlaxoSmithKline. I did marketing on billion-dollar brands. I ran a couple of large national sales forces. Moved to Memphis actually for a UT technology at GTX, and unfortunately that never got anything through FDA. But my family and I really liked Memphis. So we stayed here. The last couple of years, I was actually the vice president for the 0 to 510 medical device accelerator. And then finally, I'm not just entrepreneur in residence. I'm actually a co-founder of Convey MD, which we built a podcast platform for medical education. So, anyway, really one of the things I've always enjoyed the most is working with faculty members, blown away by your creativity and your inquisitiveness about solving problems. And so the question is always, so what do you do with this? And so that's the part I enjoyed the most, is helping you figure out what the maximum potential for your innovation is, and then helping to put together a plan to realize that potential. So I am available to, and this is one of the things I want to stress out of this is I am available to help with the advice or mentoring sessions. And so please reach out to me on that email address there. I'm going to stop. That's enough about me. I'm sure the questions you really want to hear from, the answers from, are Monica and Wei. So I'll start with Monica. First of all, why did you choose to form a startup instead of taking the more traditional path of licensing out a technology? And then the second part of that is, how did you just get started?
Those are excellent questions. This was something I've always wanted to do in terms of working for a drug company. Even before I started graduate school, the laboratory I chose to do my work in was someone with very strong industry ties. I can't tell you why I wanted to work for a drug company, but it was something that was always part of who I was. And it never worked out for me to get a position at an established company. I've always been successful in academics, and I enjoyed the freedom. That's something I also really, really am passionate about, is the intellectual freedom you have within academia. And so I decided to, as time went on, our work became much more translational. And I'm sure Richard remembers, probably at least 15 years ago, we discovered this one molecule that we thought would be a great therapy for atrophic age-related macular degeneration. And I met with some people, Jan Bouten and his group, and we were going to hire a CEO, and we were going to get moving on this, developing this technology. But it became clear very early on that it was really difficult to get something through for atrophic AMD, and the costs for clinical trials were going to be astronomical, and it just didn't seem like something that would be the right platform to launch a company. So we pulled back from that, and I learned a lot of lessons with that first non-start, if you will. And then later on, when we developed a technology that was for a different ocular disease, for glaucoma, and it would be much easier to do a clinical trial, and it's an FDA approved drug that we are repurposing. It just seemed like a really good fit to launch this as our company. Addressing why I started the company and sort of rolled this over into oculotherapy as opposed to licensing it out. I did explore that. I worked with Richard and Lakita for quite a long time, and we had multiple discussions with multiple existing companies, and it never seemed like it was a good fit. They always wanted something that didn't seem quite right for me, or they wanted everything with no give back to the university for our efforts. And so I just said, enough of that. Let's recruit my own C-level officers, and let's give it a shot and do it on our own. And we're taking baby steps, but we are constantly moving forward. We reach out to UTRF all the time for guidance and assistance. We work with Chris West all the time. He's wonderful in giving us guidance and following up with us and checking on us. The state of Tennessee has lots of resources that are available to anyone who's interested in becoming an entrepreneur. NIH has lots of resources. So we just, like I said, decided to do this as our own company, and we'd like to take it. I've never had the intention of filling up little eye drop bottles and selling them. That's never been my end game. But we do want to take our technology through a certain number of milestones so that it will be much more attractive to be hopefully purchased by a larger pharma company in, within 3 to 5 years is what our goal is.
Perfect. Wei, we'd love to hear your story as well.
Yes, so my story is a little bit different, but obviously there's a lot of similarities. So being a medicinal chemist, that's kind of a natural thing for me to go move on with this. I have colleagues who had started a company like Duan. My colleague, he started I think ED Labs. Gabor Tiki started RX Bio, and I think Lisa Jennings, I've got her company, and more recently Monica started her company. So we actually had a set of compounds that I'm involved in. The tubulin inhibitor that has been moved on to clinical trials right now, and I've been working with the GTX on these different things. So I know a little bit of the drug development side on the cancer area. What really makes me try to start is I will be a NCI, SBI, or STTR grant reviewer, I think since 2011, 2012. And I saw many of these applications that they have the company, they have startup, and boy, many of these applications are just not really that great, to be honest. And I feel that the technology that we invented in our lab here at UTHSC is going to be better than a lot of them. So so that's what I feel that. Another thing that, at least in the small molecule drug discovery, the early stage really was nothing. So really how to increase the value by de-risk it and make it a little mature before you can attract outside companies or partners to really do it. And I feel that I'm most familiar with the compound because it's invented in my lab. So I feel that I can have motivation to really move it forward, and at least in the very early stage, so that to drive it to a certain stage before we can really partner or attract other people. So that's my motivation. And as far as why I started in 2018, I was actually trying to catch up the NCI SBR deadline, which is January deadline, which I regretted to do that because I did not really make it to the January deadline. I had to make it to April deadline, but because my company exists 1.5 months in 2018, I had to pay hundreds of dollars for the registration for the state of Tennessee. So I probably should have started in 2019. But anyway, so that's that's basically my story here.
All right, perfect. And you actually mentioned both of you mentioned several important things, but one of those would be get to proof of concept on your early stage invention as fast as possible, right? Whatever you need, the data you need to give you the courage to say, I really now believe there's something there, right? So I think that's really important. So I guess then the next step is you decide, well, okay, I'm going to do this, but obviously these aren't free. I mean, it requires early stage funding. So Wei, you talked a little bit about grant funding. If you don't mind, talk about, the pros and cons of grant funding versus fundraising versus, just taking on debt to support your startup here. How'd you do it? What are the pros and cons of that? And then Monica, I'll come back to you after that as well.
Yeah, so obviously for the early stage, I'm not going to sell my house to support my company. So that's not going to happen. So I'm very confident. Again, it's a frequent NCI, SBR, CTR reviewers. I'm very confident, maybe a little bit too optimistic that if I will write the grant, I will get it. I will get one. I at least get one SBR phase 1. So phase 2, I'm not sure, but phase 1, multiple phase 1, I think I don't think I have a problem. So therefore, initially I just use my own saving money. I have to convince my wife that I can take the money from the home to do that. But fortunately, we submitted the first application in April, and we got funded in September. So that's helpful. In terms of the grant money versus investment, I think again for our technology, it's a new molecule, and it has not been de-risked sufficiently. It's really difficult to attract outside investors to invest in the technology. Or it's just very dirt cheap, they just. So I would say at the beginning with the grant money is probably the best way, at least for me. Number one is non-diluting shares. So the government is not going to take shares of the company. So they just provide the funding for the R&D. And number two, you would be amazed how much resources the government has to support the entrepreneurship, especially for NCI. We have later on we have these ICOPs, and NCI have this table, what is the PIBA assessment, basically pay for a company to help you to do the market research, and also connect us with FDA officers. And so I think there's a lot of resources, free resources from the government there to help. So that's the nice thing, at least for the early stage company. So that's what I.
Great answer, Mark. How about you?
We've taken a similar approach as Wei, but before we even started applying for SBIR grants, we took advantage of the things that are available even on our own campus. We applied for several maturation funding opportunities from UTRF, and we were successful in several of those. We even got a phase 2 grant from UTRF for one of those. So I think between the phase 1 and phase 2, that was $45,000. So you can get a lot of your early stage work done with that. We were also fortunate to get some funds from a Cornet Award from Dr. Steve Goodman's office. And we actually got an award from Dr. Strom from the College of Medicine. So I don't even know collectively what it is that we received from various offices on the UT campus, but it was enough to really get us going. We also were fortunate to apply for a MicroGrant from the state of Tennessee, which gives you, I believe it was $4,000 to get the assistance to write our first SBIR grant application, because it's similar to an R01 application, but there are certain nuances that an SBIR or STTR needs you to include, that as just a basic scientist or even a translational scientist, you don't have to account for those things, but they're expected in a small business grant application. So we use those $4,000 from the MicroGrant to assist us with writing our first SBIR. And we've been fortunate enough to get to receive 2 phase 1 SBIRs from the National Eye Institute to support our work. Also, the state of Tennessee has additional funds. They're called matching funds. They're not always available, and they're dependent upon, obviously, the state government and the funding of the state of Tennessee. But depending upon where you are in the cycle, and if you've recently been awarded an SBIR or an STTR, your company can apply for at least partial matching funds. And we've been successful in getting that twice. So collectively, we've gotten about $250,000 from the state of Tennessee to assist us because we were successful with our SBIR applications. And that's what we've used so far to fund the company. We would like to, in addition, we were very fortunate to receive an R24 grant from the National Eye Institute, which is a relatively large grant. It's up to $1.5 million a year for 5 years, with the goal of taking a technology that you've developed in your laboratory, and at the end of those 5 years, you're expected to file an investigational new drug application with the FDA. So it's not enough money to get you all the way there, but it really, really, really helps. So we've got that as well. And our goal right now, we're working on having our first pre-IND meeting with the FDA very early in 2020. And as soon as we meet that milestone and we have solid direction from the FDA and what they're going to expect from us, then we're going to start to look for outside investors. But we wanted to, get through a few milestones and increase the inherent value of the company before we start to bring in dilutive funds.
Boy, that's really, are there any questions from any of you out there on either one of those? I mean, that's a lot of information, a lot of really good advice. If there are questions about that, I'd like to stop here and get those answered. Richard, otherwise, if there are other things that you might like to add about, UTRF resources or UT resources, because this is obviously a very important topic for startups.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo, and the timing is great because the UTRF call for maturation applications is going on right now with the deadline next month, October 22nd. So this is the time. We do it once a year in the fall. So if it's something that you're interested in, now is the time to do it. The MicroGrants, I do believe, is a year-round program that I think that's basically funded consistently, and whenever you have a startup and are ready to get some assistance, UTRF can provide a letter of recommendation to support that. And as Monica said, the matching program is a fantastic program. In fact, it's so fantastic, it typically runs out of money within a month after being funded each year. So I believe that for the current fiscal year, they've already run through nearly $7 million in funding based on how many grants were given across the state. But it's been funded pretty consistently every year. It wasn't funded during the COVID year, but otherwise, I think it's been funded 3 out of the last 4 years and does seem to have a lot of support. So it feels like it's something that will be there going forward also.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd just like to add that, I've been really impressed with UTHSC, UTRF support of early stage entrepreneurs. And so, I certainly can help a commercialization strategy, but otherwise, Richard, Akita, and James all help the teams to understand funding options to improve grant opportunities that might be available. So if that's something you're considering, they can, certainly help you understand that landscape. So, gosh, I know as a startup founder myself, this takes a tremendous amount of time. So how do you balance the time versus your careers, versus your family, versus everything else you do? How do you balance it all, Monica? Assuming you do.
Yeah, to the best of my ability, I guess. You have to be really good at compartmentalizing. You kind of make a schedule. Everything is on my calendar. I don't rely on myself to remember what I have to do when. I put everything on my calendar because there is so much going on. I've got 2 kids. I've, have a very active research lab. I'm very involved in the administration of the ophthalmology department as well. Got the company. I've been really, really fortunate to have recruited for both my laboratory as well as the company fabulous people. And that is, I think, absolutely critical. People who are highly skilled, very knowledgeable, self-starters, don't need me to tell them every little step of everything they need to do. We discuss, the end game, the ultimate vision, and there's a lot of trust between everybody that everyone will do what needs to be done to meet the deadlines that we have. And so far it's worked really, really well. I think being open, sharing your vision, and putting that trust in people working with you helps to empower everyone to do the tasks or jobs that they need to do. Without all the people that work with me and every little aspect, we couldn't be nearly as successful as we are. So we've got a great team.
Awesome. Wei, how about you?
Yes, so I think obviously Monica summarized very well. So for my company, it's a little bit, I guess it's earlier than Monica's. So also for the small molecule oncology drug, there's actually a very well-defined package that needs to be done, and there are many CROs out there that we could outsource the work on. So initially, I think to me the most difficult time, most of the time spending period is the initial setting up the company, because I knew nothing about the company. So I'm fortunate to have access to UTRF, to other colleagues, especially Monica. Actually, Monica is gracious enough to go to lunch with me and educating me on how to set up the company, a lot of this information. So I learned a lot from Monica, but still it's a very steep learning curve. Once we got that, it's actually relatively easier to just have the work done both here and outsourcing. In terms of personnel, so we have I have Alisa as a consultant for the finance, for the bookkeeping, because that's very important for the company, especially when we involve the federal government money, SBR money. And we have a consultant from Emory University, from Children's Hospital of Atlanta, and all the other teams. So I also have Dr. Steve Bears, who is providing a lot of advice on the business side. And so, yes, so, the team is important, and just have to work really hard. And as Monica said, I cannot remember things. So if things not on my calendar, there's nothing going to happen. So that's also very important. Just how to balance different things. But I think the nicest thing about the project is that it's also connected with the lab research. So similar to Monica, we have relatively size R1 on this project. So that's kind of helping with the project as well on the academic side.
Well, that really leads me to the next topic. I mean, how did you form your company? Is it, is it an LLC? Is it a C Corp? Did you use, online resources? Did you hire a law firm? How did you approach that whole thing? And what did you eventually net out? So Monica, you want to go first?
I did it through, was it LegalZoom or something? It was an online portal that we originally used to set things up as an LLC. And our plans right now, I still am an LLC, but our plans are to immediately after, in January 2022, we will convert to a Corp. And I'm having discussions with my accountant as to what's best, the C Corp or the S Corp. And we've had discussions, but I need to have more discussions to help me understand what are the tax advantages or tax burdens that are associated with each of them. But we'll be making that change. And for that, now that we are much more of a substitute company, I'll use an attorney to help with file the paperwork when we convert to a corporation. What else did you ask, Chris? Did I touch on?
Do you use a legal team right now to help you with any other advice? And if so, what is that?
Yes, we do have a firm that we deal with all the time. Baker Donaldson is who we use, who's a local Memphis-based firm. And we do all of our patent work with them. Any legal questions that come up, I run it past them. And they're very open, they're very helpful and responsive. I've been very pleased with them.
Wei, how about you?
So again, since my company is still in the earlier stage than Monica's, so we also started with LLC. I think that's the simplest one, and it's less burden in terms of different things, and also use online resources to draft the I guess, the company document there at the beginning. So I guess we'll remain with this LLC for a while until we really de-risk the compound and make it to be, I guess, attractive enough before we expand on that. I do not have, I do not work with any law firms officially, although I do have alumni in the East Coast who kind of provide advice on a complementary basis, but it's not a real, lawyer-client relationship. So at this stage, but in the future, we'll certainly consider that.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, sorry, one quick follow-up for both is, did you register as Tennessee corporations or as Delaware or an alternative, a third state?
I did Tennessee just because I didn't know what I was doing way back then.
Yeah, so I also did a Tennessee, but what I heard that if you are going to convert to say a S Corp or C Corp, that it's best to be registered at Delaware because of the environment, and everybody knows about the Delaware.
Yeah.
Richard, you want to add to that?
No, I mean, those are the two ones that we see the most, although I have recently talked to an entrepreneur that was saying that Nevada is up and coming as maybe the next Delaware, and that there's a fair number of investors that are getting more comfortable with Nevada registrations. But what we've seen is Tennessee's home. Tennessee, of course, is a pretty business-friendly state. I don't think anyone looks at the business law in Tennessee and considers it to be burdensome or too complicated. And Wei is absolutely correct. I mean, Delaware is sort of the default corporation state that no one's going to look sideways at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could add to that, even from my own experience, with ConveyMD, we started as an LLC, a Tennessee LLC. And again, I think the principles that, Michael and Wei have laid out are absolutely right. With early stage companies, if you're going to fail, you want to fail fast and fail cheap, right? Mm-hmm. So there's really both ends of that, of that edict, if you will. So for us, we did hire a law firm to help us with an LLC, but it was also Baker Donaldson, but we used really sort of a standardized template they provided us. We did all of our edits. They reviewed it, then sort of approved it, stamped it, did all the paperwork for us, and then we were down the road on that. Once we actually started recruiting professional investors, we had to flip over to a C Corp, and they all really rather insisted on Delaware because I think they're all trained on Delaware law and they understand that very well. So that's why Delaware has, is sort of the gold standard. But along the same lines, you heard a lot about, de-risking your asset. So we did the same thing. We listed out the business assumptions that we thought were important for us to have a successful company. And we started putting experiments in place as quickly as possible to answer those assumptions one way or the other. And so we sort of had a gated plan for both our funding and future resources we were going to need based off of how well we answer those resources. So I'm going to encourage you to think about, again, both sides of those is if you're going to fail fast and fail cheap. But the other side of that is get to proof of concept as fast as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, we had a question coming in, and it's probably, we throw these terms around, but what exactly is an LLC and a C Corp and an S Corp? I don't know if you wanted to give a quick answer. I mean, of course, the whole business law courses go into that, but if you could give a short answer, that would be great.
Yeah, limited liability corporation or LLC allows a small number of founders to form a company that provides some liability protection, but then the funding of that sort of flows through from a tax standpoint to the founders, right? So you have if you make a profit, the profit flows through to the founders. If you have a loss, it flows through on the tax standpoint, and that's sort of the advantages of an LLC. A C Corp, all of there are more protections both for the company as well as for investors. And importantly, all of the financing stays at the level of the company. So the company absorbs the profits or the losses, and the founders just, you know, take a salary or a share of the profits or something like that after. But that's sort of the pros and cons. If you're going to look for angel investors, an angel investor might be interested in an LLC because assumably you're going to lose a lot of money in the early days. So there's some tax advantages, but really most professional investors are more comfortable around the C Corp or an S Corp because there are just more protections in terms of, you know, who's standing in line for, you know, if the company fails, who's standing in line, you know, on the assets and the unwinding of the company. So there are more protections there for investors. And if you don't add to that, Richard, you can certainly feel free.
No, I think that's good, and you know, as Monica and Wei have said, you know, when you're really starting to make this decision for real, you want to have someone giving you professional, you know, legal and
Sure.
accounting advice, so you understand it for your specific situation.
Mhm.
If I could add one last thing to that, Richard, is we view there are some sort of cornerstone functions that our company must provide for our investors, for them to invest, right? So one is legal, of course, one is accounting, you know, there's some others, but we do a lot of the work ourselves, but we do it under the supervision of professionals. So again, to use the example of, you know, the LLC corporate documents, they gave us a standard template. We spent an afternoon working through how we wanted to edit those, sent those back over to them, and then they reviewed those and we discussed it, and then we incorporated the company around that. Same thing, we pay all of our own bills, but we do hire an accounting firm that reviews us on a monthly basis. They did an audit for us. And I can tell you, as we're standing in front of investors, they really appreciate both the frugality of how we're doing our business, but also the oversight of professionals to make sure there's not an issue down the road that they're going to wish they had learned about earlier.
Yeah, I agree with that. We do the same thing. We try to cut costs. We do the majority of things ourselves, but we always have professionals who are giving us advice and then double checking to make sure we've done it properly.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, another thing, if I can add on, is that again, if you get any federal support, you are required to maintain a strict accounting software that need to be there. So you cannot just do it Excel, whatever, simple accounting. That is not allowed.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that then. So you received this grant. What are the obligations? How much of a burden, if you will, for your company to meet the requirements of these grants?
Well, I can start first, and Monica. So obviously, just like any federal grant, you have to do the work that you propose to do, and you have to have a very strict accounting system to account for the direct costs, indirect costs, and the fees, and how you spend them, how you bucket them. There are certain categories that you are allowed to use the funding for. There are certain categories you are not allowed to use the funding for. So there's many stipulations and many strings attached to the federal money. That's, the good part is non-dilution. The bad part, well, not the bad part. I mean, the other part is that it has a lot of accountability, just as anything that you work with the government.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But in terms of the psychology of dealing with those restrictions, it's not that much different from when you have to handle your budgets for an R01 grant or any other grant that you're going to get from NIH. So it's not that it's so scary and you shouldn't do it. You're dealing with most of those restrictions anyway and guidelines, and you can, like Wei said, you can pay for this, but you can't pay for that. And as long as you know what those are, it's not onerous or terrifying or anything.
Well, let's talk about your team then. You mentioned this previously. How many members of your company do you have? How did you recruit them? And when and how did you decide to add another team member? Monica, you want to go first?
Sure. So I have two other C-level officers. I'm the founder and the chief scientific officer. I have a CEO and a COO. My CEO is, she always calls herself a placeholder, but she's been so much more than a placeholder. This is actually someone who's been my mentor for 30 years. She recruited me into my first faculty position at the University of Texas in Houston. And then she also recruited me here to UT Hamilton Eye Institute 25 years ago. Her name is Diana Johnson. She's used to be a faculty member in ophthalmology. She was our director of research for many years, and she retired from active laboratory work a number of years ago. I don't even know how many, at least probably close to 10 now. And she's a professor emeritus, and she's brilliant, and she's very eloquent, and she's an excellent grant writer. And she's very good at seeing big pictures of whatever project she's involved in. And so I recruited her to be our CEO, and she's been absolutely terrific in helping guide us through these waters so far. We all understand that once we cross that bridge of our milestone with our first pre-IND meeting with the FDA, it'll probably be time to recruit someone into that position who has previous CEO experience to take us to the next level. And so that is something we'll be doing probably early next week, next year. My COO, Chief Operations Officer, is someone who has been working with startup companies in the Memphis arena for a number of years. She got her PhD from UT a number of years ago and has been working with RxBio. And so her name is Alyssa Bowler, and she works with us on a part-time basis. No one is full-time. We don't have the funds to pay anyone full-time, but Alyssa works with us 1 or 2 days a week, is compensated accordingly. And she handles our books. She works with our CROs to, decide what we need to do, what type of analytical test methods we need, what GLP studies we need, et cetera, et cetera. And so because she has experience with that from previous work with startups, she handles all of that. The three of us work very, very closely together and sort of share the burden as we move the company forward. I've got several other consultants that actually who work with me in my laboratory at UT as well. They do outside consulting for oculotherapy when we need them to do certain things. We also take advantage of other people in the industry who are paid consultants for us. So we have several people who are working with us who used to work at very large ophthalmic pharmaceutical companies who have since retired. And so we reach out to them to get their expertise, and they help us. Well, at Alcon, we used to do this, or, with this company or this type of technology, I recommend you do this. And they're helping us put together our clinical plans, our preclinical plans. Again, we're doing a lot of the work ourselves, and then we show it to them and they help us make adjustments. And so this is kind of the budget way that we are able to, piece together everything. And like I said, we're going to be meeting with the FDA in just a few months, and it's a strategy that's worked for us.
Sounds like a perfect startup strategy to me. So Wei, how about you?
Yes, so again, my company is earlier. So we are developing new small molecules. The path is actually very well defined by the FDA for the CDER. So I have really two people in the company. So myself and Dr. Jim Wu, who is the VP for research. And also fortunate to have access to Dr. Alyssa Bowler to help us do the bookkeeping and financial report to the NIH and all these different area. And apart from that, really just a consultant. I have consultant, as I said, Emory University and the Children's Hospital of Atlanta, and because we are developing a pediatric oncology drug. Also I have collaborators at Emory, Dr. Muxiang Zhou, who is doing some of the subcontract work there. And then unofficial consulting with some of my friends in the East Coast on the legal and the other areas. So I don't have a CEO. I don't think I need a CEO at this point, but later on, if I do need a CEO, I'm probably going to find someone who really have experience leading a drug from to the market oncology area. So that's my plan is for now.
Perfect. Monica, we have a question from Andrew Griffith. Where do you do the lab work, and how do you partition the space and administration for the company versus work funded by other resources?
Mm-hmm. I had just messaged Andy back, but I'm happy to discuss that. So we actually rent laboratory space for oculotherapy from UT. The space that we rent is in the Hamilton Eye Institute. It's on the same floor where I have my research labs. So we get a bill from UT every month and send them a check. And so that's where we do oculotherapy specific work. In terms of administration, I have an office in my home, and that my home is the actual official address for oculotherapy. And so that's where all administration takes place, is in an office in my home.
Well, you want to add anything to that, Wei?
No, I think so. Monica, I guess it's fortunate. So I was trying to rent a hood in our college pharmacy building, but I was told that that is not allowed by our college. I mean, again, that's just college pharmacy thing. So I was fortunate to rent a office, and that's a shared lab in the Van Vliet building. By working with Dr. Campbell office, so that's so far so good. And then the research-wise, again, most of the research work was done by my subcontractor at Emory as well as the CROs. So that's how I operate.
I want to add one thing. So on the SBIRs that we've gotten for oculotherapy, we have subcontracts back to UT as well. So some of the work we do for those grants are done through the subcontract back to my laboratory at UT. So that's another way we handle that.
Richard, do you want to add anything to that? Are there other resources or considerations?
Yeah, so Wei mentioned the Van Vliet building. That's something that we've been working with UTRF in coordination with Vice Chancellor Goodman and Executive Vice Chancellor Ken Brown to use that as incubator space, really with a vision strategically to turning that into a full-fledged life science business incubator. This is something that they not just UTRF wants to accomplish, but the campus wants to accomplish. Their budget realities, turning a building into an incubator, and for a while there was simple space limitations with so much construction going on campus. But I'd say to anyone that's interested, please contact myself or UTRF, Dr. Brown, Dr. Goodman. I think that the campus has been pretty good about finding a way to support entrepreneurs that need some separate space, because that's what we want is to have a distinction between the academic role and the startup role, and both Monica and Wei have found solutions that are exactly along these lines.
So if I can add one point, I really appreciate the effort from UTRF and Dr. Campbell's office to set this up, because again, as SBR, ICTR grant reviewers, and if you see the company address is someone's garage versus a dedicated incubator, that give a very different perception to reviewers in terms of the credibility for the company and all this other stuff. So I think Memphis does need to have a dedicated incubator, so that to have this infrastructure and facility to help the faculty to accomplish this.
So this is Andy. I just put a question in, and I'm really interested to follow up on this idea of the company space being nearby the academic space, because it sounds like there's maybe some intellectual benefit to that versus having the company space in another building. And the reason I ask is that we have in the College of Medicine a lot more space than we need. I'm trying to get all of it, a lot of it cleaned out. And I'm wondering if it's a good idea to keep space in reserve amongst the different buildings for people potentially to rent it out.
I mean, my answer would be, absolutely, because we want this to be as turnkey as possible. If someone comes up with the idea and the commitment to give this a shot, we want to make it easy for them.
Okay.
It's worked out really well for us.
Yeah.
I much prefer it here on the same floor where my other
Right.
labs are than having to go, even if it's, 4 blocks away to the Van Vliet building, there's just a barrier there that makes it, I'm really busy. I don't have 3 hours to just run over there and do this, but it's easy if you go down the hallway. So, and we started this before Van Vliet became available for rent, and we were offered space there, and I turned it down because we'd already established it here on our floor, and UT's administration was happy to allow us to keep it here, and it's been great.
Yeah, if I can add that, so I would also think that's gonna be much better if we could do that. So that's what I initially approached to our college administration, but I was turned down. Think that I cannot do that in the pharmacy building. In my experience as a grant reviewer, I know it's really dependent on the institution. Some institutions allow the faculty to rent, like say half of the lab or a film hood for the company, and some institutions does not allow that. So it really depends on the institution, what the institution want to do, or the whatever the policy that is there. But I would say yes. So if you can do that in the same place, that is going to be much more efficient and much more productive than different places.
I'm wondering if that decision Wei received versus the decision Monica received was more of a college or department level decision, because we have buildings where we have more than enough space, but other buildings that are tight.
Well, ours was negotiated directly with Tony Ferrara.
Okay.
And he gave thumbs up, and
I did not go that high level. So I just talked with my department, and then my associate dean for research said no, that's not going to work. So I did not pursue further. Maybe I should.
Well, and if I could, I hate to speak for Dr. Strong, but I know I've had meetings with him. He's actually a successful entrepreneur where he spun a company out of the University of Maryland with his own technology. I can tell you he's very interested in finding solutions to move technologies forward. And so without making any promises beyond that, I can say there's a very large organizational push to help entrepreneurs to move their research forward.
yeah. But that's College of Medicine, Wei's in College of Pharmacy. So it's
Right.
a different college on our campus.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So we probably have time for one last question, Chris.
Yeah, so I guess, last question is, what advice would you give to your colleagues if they're considering starting a company, taking their technology and moving it forward? What advice would you give?
Who do you want to go first?
How about you, Monica?
Okay. If you're thinking, if you have some technology that you think is a potential for a spin-off company, start talking to people. I have spent, I don't know how many hours talking with Richard and Lakita about different things, and them helping and pointing me in different directions. I mean, they're the first resource I would go and talk to. But then we have numerous entrepreneurs on our campus. Wei and I are just only 2 of them, but there are numerous others. So go figure out who they are and go talk with them and hear a little bit more about their journey and see if it's something that is still intriguing or scares you off or whatever. But again, make that decision early. And if just go for it. If it's something you're really interested in, go for it. There are lots of resources, both locally, nationally. You know, it's fun. I am having the best time. It's really been an exciting journey, and I'm very happy I did it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I would add to Monica. So obviously, I think that yes, for here, because we have still Memphis is not, you know, San Francisco or Boston, so you're going to have limited resources and expertise. So talking with the faculty and talking with UTRF, it's going to be very important. So I personally benefit a lot from following Monica's steps in the company. Another thing I would say, if you try to start a company, you really have to believe in the technology. You need to really sure that you need to believe that this is going to work, and you have really assess that. The third thing, just to be prepared. That you may need to put in some resources committed to it, right? You started a company, unless you're lucky to have the investment, you have to rely on your own cash or your friend's cash before you can get grant money or whatever. So that could be some expenses that you have to think about it with your family and all the other resources. So.
I guess if I just add one thing to this is, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, you don't have all the answers to all the questions. I'm not even sure I know all the questions at this point to ask for my own company, but we go in every day, we work as hard as we can. We talk to all of the resources we have, the mentors we have, the consultants we have, and we just move forward. And then as we look back to see where we were 3 months ago, we're sort of astounded with our progress. So anyway, thank you all for this. Monica Wei, fantastic panel here, resources. I'm available. I'm sure both of them are available as well if you have questions that you would like to take offline. And Richard, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll echo, Monica, Wei, and Chris, thank you for a great session. I hope, I expect that people learned a lot, and hopefully we'll see more people following in your footsteps. That's what we want to see and we want to support. And then I'd also, because I was saying this whole session actually came out of a conversation after our last UTRF Tech Talk, where someone said, we'd love to have a Q&A with some faculty entrepreneurs. So UTRF, wants to provide tech talks that are useful. So please, anyone that has an idea for a tech talk they would like to hear or a topic they'd like to see covered, contact myself, Lakita, Tanika, James, anyone at UTRF, so that we can, steer these tech talks to be as useful as possible. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.